Hi, welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is military affairs and the tragic death of Russian soldiers on New Year's Eve. I know I'm going to get a lot of negative flack about that. It is a huge event. 63 soldiers were killed in an attack by Ukrainians on a on a New Year's Eve, and that's only the dead. That doesn't, unfortunately, the numbers of the wounded are not available. And this happened in Makivka, which is just sort of northeast of Donetsk city. And the distance, I know there is no distance indicator, but the distance between 2 and 3 kilometers between Donetsk city and Makivka. And as we have noticed or have spoken many times about this, about the priorities of the Russian military, it should have been a priority from the start of the SMO to drive the Ukrainian forces away from the Donetsk city, because the Donetsk city has been bombarded for the last 8 years by the Ukrainian forces, and many civilian people have died during those 8 years. And when Russia started with this SMO, again, nothing moved on the front of the Donetsk city. Fighting continued everywhere else except there. And I've spoken many times about this. But for some other reason, I don't know, the Russians decided it's not a priority. And now they are reaping the fruits of their decisions. Because at the end of the day, the information goes like this, that the Ukrainians fired 6 HIMARS missiles onto this position where the Russian military soldiers were concentrated and having a New Year's party and a festival. And again, I will stress it again, 63 soldiers died. Now, I'm not totally sure how the numbers go in the Russian army, but in the South African army, that would be 2 platoons. That's 2/3 of a company. That's a huge amount of soldiers that have died. And we're not counting the wounded. And naturally, the Russians are angry about this. Not the Russian military command. They sort of, well, the news media says that in a rare occasion, they admitted how many people have died. But according to bloggers and reporters, the Russians, this whole event angered the Russian nationalists, including lawmakers, and drawing demands for commanders to be punished by housing soldiers alongside ammunition dumps. So this party was held, or concentration of troops were held apparently in the same building where ammunition was stored, which is a no-no in all sense of military doctrines. And secondly, there is information available that this whole building was surrounded by openly displayed military equipment, meaning vehicles, trucks, maybe some APCs or tanks. So that was an obvious target for the Ukrainians. And then the worst about this whole story is that the air defenses were active and the missile attack was executed precisely at 12 o'clock in the evening. And 1 minute past 12 o'clock, they landed onto this concentration and the soldiers died. the air defenses shot down 2 of these HIMARS. Usually it's a lot more higher. But for some other reason, well, my guess is the troops in the air defenses were not wakey. They were probably drinking for the New Year's Eve introduction into the new year. And then they missed it. And then suddenly saw the alarms on the screens. They jumped into position. They only had time to fire 2 or 4 missiles in order to destroy the 2 HIMARS. But 4 of them landed. And for me, this is a sort of a disgrace. I know pro-Russian commentators will try to make excuses again. Oh, no, it was a lack of... no, it will not change anything on the war. No, it will have no influence. No, that is just an unhappy event. No, well, in my opinion, bullshit. It is a clear sign that even the Russian commanders are not that invincible and all-knowing and all-strategic and all up to gear and so on, that they can be considered as, well, at this stage, call it a winning force, a winning command structure. If you look at the Russian army, then basically you can say, yes, they have the equipment. They have a huge advantage in numbers of equipment, and they have missiles that are precision. But I still have to see the military command capabilities. And it seems to me the Russians are totally lacking that type of command structure and skill level that is required. You can have the best weapons in the world, but if you make stupid mistakes like this, then you're going to lose the war. And you can criticize me as much as you want. That is the fact that stares you in the eye. And I'm not the only person that says that. So here, military blogger said the huge destruction was the result of storing ammunition in the same building as a barracks, despite commanders knowing it was within the range of the Ukrainian rockets. Within the range. It's still like on a Kiev, Donetsk front line that hasn't moved. Here it says, Igor Girkin, a former commander of pro-Russian troops in eastern Ukraine, who is now one of the highest profile Russian nationalist military bloggers, said hundreds have been killed or wounded in the blast. And what happened in Makivka is horrible, wrote an Archangel Spetsnaz Z, another Russian military blogger with more than 700,000 followers on Telegram. Who came up with the idea to place personnel in large buildings in one building, large numbers in one building, where even a fool understands that even if they hit with artillery, there will be many wounded or dead. That's what he wrote. Commanders couldn't care less about ammunition stored in disarray on the battlefield. And the open fury extended to the Russian lawmakers. A person called Grigory Karasin, a member of the Russian Senate and former deputy foreign minister, not only demanded vengeance against Ukraine and his NATO supporters, but also an exacting internal analysis. Sergei Mironov, a legislator and former chairman of the Senate, Russia's upper house, demanded criminal liability for the officials who had allowed concentrations of military personnel in an unprotected building, and all the higher authorities who did not provide the proper level of security. And then Andrei Medvedev, a deputy speaker to the Moscow City Duma and a pro-Kremlin journalist, said authorities, whether civilian or military, must value Russian lives. Either a person is of the highest value and then punished for stupid losses of personnel as for treason to the fatherland, or the country is over. That is what Medvedev wrote on his Telegram. So you can see a lot of people are actually also complaining about that. Now that was a fatal mistake. And the funny thing is that on the same night, Russia fired a lot of UIVs to attack Ukrainian infrastructures and Kiev city and so on. So it's not that they were all having a lull in the war to have some festival. No, the Russians were also acting on New Year's Eve. And they also fired, say, ammunition at the Ukraine in the same way that and then there is some speculations or saying that, yes, it was American satellite and intelligence that supplied the targeting for the Ukrainian attack. I'm not totally convinced about that. I believe there was a person on the ground, pro-Ukraine, in that Makivka city that observed the festivals and provided the coordinates to the Ukrainian missile battery. Now, I'm actually very, very, very angry about this because this was totally negligence on the Russian command. And again, I will now call back the story about Pavlovka. Pavlovka was the incident where about 300 soldiers, Russian soldiers, attacked the city of the town of Pavlovka in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. And basically they were slaughtered. There were alleged about 300 soldiers that died. And the troops actually had a semi-mutiny against their general, where they shouted at him, and there are photographs of this available. And he called him names, and he was drunk, apparently drunk, when he sold to them. And he was all for personal gains, and he didn't look after his troops, and 300 more or less died. Yes, the Russian defense put the numbers in a different format, like 1% of the battalion has died and 7% was wounded and so on. But at the end of the day, it comes back to the 300 personnel. And they lost hardware. And they what achieve? They progressed 5 kilometers into the Pavlovka area. But I thought territory is not important for the Russians. That is what every time I'm being told. But no, 5 kilometers advancing is a good thing. But the retreats of kilometers in Izium and Liman, that is tactical retreats. And the Kherson retreat, that's a tactical retreat. Oh, no. That's. So come on, people. Do you want to butter your bread on both sides? And it is clearly acknowledged that the Izium offensive by the Ukrainians was unexpected, unprepared for, and ill-defended. It was a military blunder, in my opinion, but excuses were made. And who complained even against the Russian command? The Chechnyan leader and the leader of the Wagner group. And they expressed their opinions on that. But again, pro-Russian commentators say I'm pro-Western and talking nonsense, don't know what I'm talking about, but they just refuse to basically acknowledge the facts on the ground. How can you concentrate, say, 100 people, and they are not all normal soldiers? There will be some officers and NCOs as well in that group that have now died. Unnecessary. How can the air defense system sleep behind the controls and prefer to drink some vodka or whatever again, and then put their own men in? Those people, so those 2 soldiers, whoever was that air defense, should be actually court-martialed. And whoever is in command of that area, the commander should be court-martialed. No exception. This is going to have seriously impact at home as well. There will be lots of consequences in Moscow and the rest of Russia. This is a seriously event. And it clearly shows to the enemy that the Russians are not invincible. And I remember, I always said that Putin is very concerned about the troops and the troops' lives. He knows what is sacrificed. He wants to minimize casualties. That is what the guidelines are on his command to the SMO. And now here's somebody fucked up. And 63 soldiers died. That is not going to sit with Putin. That I can tell you. So again, I'm really pissed off, and so should you be. I'm not even going to ask you to subscribe to the channel. I'm just going to say cheers. Until next time.